Hello there and welcome back to the Net Report. Chris here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Eastern Conference and how it has really taken strides in becoming quite a competitive conference compared to the last few years. You have 4 teams headed into the 2024 to 2025 season who I could see as legitimate finals contenders, and after that you still have a few intriguing teams on the rise who I can see as dark horses heading into next season that have a lot of promise. Starting with the Big Four, as I've liked to call them, and these are 4 teams I can legitimately see as finals contenders headed into next season. The first being obviously the reigning defending NBA champion Boston Celtics, and this is as obvious as it gets. This team is still probably the deepest team in the league. They have the best starting 5 of any team. This team is of course led by all-star duo Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who were incredible in the playoffs last season. Both all-NBA guys. I don't really have to explain why this duo is one of the best in the league. They also added Kristaps Porzingis last season, who has proven to be an amazing interior presence and secondary scorer for this team. You have elite 3-and-D guards in Drew Holiday and Derek White, who were incredible throughout this championship run. You combine that killer lineup with veterans like Al Horford off the bench, who is still a key contributor even at his advanced age. Sam Hauser, who developed into a key shooter off the bench. You still have guys like Peyton Pritchard and Xavier Tillman off the bench. This Boston team is just loaded with great two-way players at every position. That's the new team building mantra we're seeing, with a ton of two-way players at every position. There's a reason they're the reigning champions, and they will be a force to be reckoned with come next season. The second of the Big Four I wanted to mention is another team loaded with two-way players, that being the New York Knicks. They made a huge trade this offseason to acquire Mikal Bridges, and they now boast a lineup of Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson. Just a loaded starting 5 with tons of great two-way players that should turn an already great Knicks defense to one of the best defenses in the league. They are also an insanely deep team with the likes of Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, Miles McBride, all coming off the bench. And with this depth combined with the addition of Mikal Bridges, they should hopefully be able to offset any bad injury luck, which was their biggest downfall this past season. This team led by Jalen Brunson, who has honestly played like a top 5 to 6 player over the past year, has the potential to be true finals contenders, and that defense has a chance to be truly scary if health permits. In the Eastern Conference, this team probably made the biggest leap in terms of improvement during the offseason. All the pieces on this team just fit seamlessly together, and I'm excited to see how far this team can truly go in the playoffs next season. The third team I feel has a real chance to be finals contenders this season is the Philadelphia 76ers, and this is a team that made massive changes to their roster in hopes of being able to truly contend in the Joel Embiid 76ers era. They of course signed Paul George to a massive 4-year, $212 million contract and form a big 3 of Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George. They also signed a ton of great complementary role players, which many were not expecting heading into this offseason given their cap situation. These signings range from Caleb Martin, Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon. They re-signed Kelly Oubre as well, and they also drafted Jared McCain, who looks promising as a floor spacer and shooter. Just don't look up his TikToks. And they still have young intriguing players like Ricky Council, who could take a big leap this season. This team just feels like it took a massive leap compared to last year's personnel. The big looming factor is of course if the team can stay healthy, especially Joel Embiid and Paul George, who have had a history of injuries. On paper, this team is definitely a finals contender, and the big 3 of Embiid, Maxey, and George should play very well off each other. But it is admittedly pretty hard seeing this team stay healthy come postseason time. But if luck shines their way, and they're able to remain mostly healthy come postseason, this team is no doubt at least a contender to make it to the NBA Finals. And lastly, I have the Milwaukee Bucks as the 4th team who I see as real finals contenders. And admittedly, I am not as high on the Bucks as the other 3 teams I listed due to the injuries they've had the past couple years and their core getting older. But it comes down to simply, they have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is still a top 5 player in the world. You pair him with Damian Lillard and give them another year to gel together, this team can look much better than it did last season. I like what they have done this offseason given they are a second apron team and can only offer minimum contracts. They brought Gary Trent Jr. on board, who should definitely be a huge addition for only being signed to a minimum contract, especially as a floor spacer and shooter. They brought in Taurean Prince, who should be a quality role player as well. They still have veterans in Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton, who while being older are still great players to have on your roster. The one big concern I have is that defense, especially in the backcourt, and Doc Rivers as the head coach, especially after the end of last season. But I will give this team the benefit of the doubt since they are led by Giannis Antetokounmpo, and if this team is healthy, they can most certainly make noise come postseason time. And while those are the 4 teams I see as having a legitimate shot at the NBA Finals, there are still quite a few teams I see as sneaky and under the radar who can win a playoff series or 2 if they get the right matchups and should definitely be in the postseason hunt at minimum. The first team I wanted to talk about is the Orlando Magic, who come off a year where they made the playoffs for the first time with this young core. Their team leader, Paolo Banchero, took a massive step forward in his development last year, becoming an all-star in only his second season. You have Franz Wagner there as well, who has been one of the best young forwards in the league, now paired with Paolo, creating one of the best young forward duos in the league. Then you have Jalen Suggs, who at 21 years old is already an all-defensive player who can shoot 40% from three-point land. I love the addition of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, another guard who can help Orlando's shooting problems while providing great defense next to Suggs in that backcourt. You still have other players like Wendell Carter Jr., who has been a quality center for them, Jonathan Isaac, who has been one of the best defenders in the league when healthy, other young players like Anthony Black and Jet Howard, who really didn't get a lot of playing time. This Magic team is one that I could see being a very great regular season team and taking that next step as their young core progresses, and they may even find themselves as a top 4 seed, and if they receive a favorable matchup or 2, they can definitely win a playoff series or make a run in the playoffs. Their future is bright, and even in a more loaded Eastern Conference, I wouldn't sleep on the Magic. Next, you have the Miami Heat, who literally just made the NBA Finals just over a year ago in the 2023 season. And this is a team that is notorious for coasting throughout the regular season and turning it up come playoff time. Still led by Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, this team should be looking to be competitive and in the playoff picture if healthy for sure. They haven't made any crazy upgrades to this roster, which has left Heat fans quite frustrated. But with guys surrounding Jimmy and Bam like Jaime Jaquez Jr., Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, this team should still be very competitive and a scary playoff matchup if healthy, especially if playoff mode Jimmy Butler is activated. Maybe a leap in a player like Jaime Jaquez or Tyler Hero can really help the Heat sustain a good regular season record, but despite their regular season struggles the past couple of years, it is hard to count this team out, as they always seem to find a way to keep things at least competitive and remain a dark horse. A playoff run by this team always feels like it is on the table if everything goes right for them, so I wouldn't count out the Heat just yet, especially in regards to just being competitive in this conference. Next, you have the Indiana Pacers, who come off one of their best seasons in franchise history. They had the second best offensive rating in the league last year, and led by Tyrese Halliburton, made some noise in the playoffs last season. Part of it was due to some favorable matchups and injuries, but this team is absolutely loaded offensively and still on the rise as a young team. They're led by Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam, who we are finally going to be able to see as a duo for a full season. They have great supporting pieces like Miles Turner, who was extremely underrated last season. Other pieces like Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard, who balled out in the playoffs. They also re-signed Obi Toppin. They still have young players who I expect to keep getting better in Jarris Walker and Benedict Mathurin. And this team is just the definition of, we are going to shoot you out the gym and outscore you. There is a reason why they were setting records in offensive rating last year, and if that offense is on, they're going to have a chance in almost any series and should remain very competitive in the Eastern Conference. And lastly, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are still a very competitive team in the Eastern Conference. They just re-signed Donovan Mitchell to a 3-year extension, and on paper, this team is as good as almost any other team in the East. There are still questions on the future regarding Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland as a pairing in that backcourt. Maybe we see a Darius Garland trade in the near future, but on paper, they are still both great individual players. You still have Evan Mobley, who is a great defensive big, who still has a decent offensive game. We are just waiting for him to really take that next step forward in his development. Jared Allen low-key had an all-star caliber season last year no one really talks about. They fired coach JB Bickerstaff this offseason and hired Kenny Atkinson, and maybe that helps this team to mesh well together and take that next step. Either way, at the very least, I still expect this team to remain very competitive and at least have a great regular season like they have the past couple seasons. And who knows, maybe they take the next step and live up to this roster potential under Kenny Atkinson. Another team that could easily win a playoff series or 2 with favorable matchups, and if they just finally hit their potential and mesh well together, the sky is truly the limit for this team. But those are the teams I feel have a real chance to be competitive in the Eastern Conference. There are, of course, teams like the Atlanta Hawks led by Trae Young, who I expect to be around play-in territory. You have the Toronto Raptors and Scottie Barnes, who have a chance to take that next step and become a play-in caliber team. Maybe even a team like Charlotte surprises us with a healthy LaMelo Ball, and we see them around play-in territory. Either way, the Eastern Conference feels a lot more loaded than in previous years and is probably the most competitive I have ever seen it in my lifetime. Gone are the days of LeBron James having a stranglehold on the East, and this truly feels like the best we've seen this Eastern Conference in a long time. But let me know in the comment section below, who are your favorites in the Eastern Conference, and if you feel this conference is much more improved over the past couple years. As always, if you enjoy this type of content, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps the channel out a ton, and will keep you up to date with our newest NBA content. As always, thank you for tuning in, and have a great one.